Hello and welcome to another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show, where this week we are super excited to have football coach Daniel Chamberlain on the show. Coach Chamberlain is also an avid podcaster, and I will personally credit him for many things. I watch him and Kenny Simpson and him and Joe Daniel and some of the stuff that he's been posting. He was just at, I believe, the Kentucky Coaches Association thing. I've watched a ton of stuff. He puts all kinds of great football content out here. Has a really interesting both football story and just life story from his military experience that we're super excited to kind of dive into today and talk about. So really honored that he's going to spend some time with us this morning and hopefully expose you to some more Arizona coaches, because I know most of our viewers are from Arizona. So if you don't follow Coach Kenny Simpson and Coach Chamberlain and Joe Daniel and those, you really should. Some outstanding stuff on there. It's definitely helped make me a better coach. And like I said, I credit him with making the treadmill usable for me, because I'll listen to a podcast and get on there and learn some football. So what could be better? Improving your heart health and learning some football and hopefully being a better coach as well. So but before we get going into that, I just want to take a moment to remind everybody that the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show is brought to you by School Funder. School Funder, the only online fundraising company in America that lets you keep all of the money your team raises. Last year, we used School Funder for our lift-a-thon, and in just a few short weeks, we were able to raise $12,000, and we kept all of that money minus the very small 3% processing fee. Many other companies would take upwards of $2,000 to do that, not with School Funder. I can tell you, it's not too good to be true. You can do it as well. Contact them at schoolfunder.org. That's SCHOOLFUNDR.org. And please let them know that the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show sent you, as it'll help out the show. And while you're watching there, we're certainly trying to grow our audience as well and get to reach as many coaches. I think one of the cool parts about this is all the guys that I started watching now. I think Coach Chamberlain, I don't know if I could ever get Joe Daniel on the show, but I think now I've had Coach Chip, we've had Coach Tatum, I got Coach Johnson lined up next week, and we've had Coach Simpson on as well. So having Coach Chamberlain on, we've almost completed all the guys that I listen to a ton. I don't know the guys at 614 Headsets, but these guys, I credit Coach Simpson and Coach Chamberlain were the first ones I started kind of watching, and then it was all over from there. Now I cannot get enough of football coaching podcasts and all sorts of information out there, and had done that before on Glacier Drive, and now I do it a little bit more on YouTube. So really thankful to him for all that, and excited to talk we're going to talk some offensive ball and some defensive ball, some 4-2-5 stuff. We'll talk some other things as well. And I'm going to ask Coach, and he might laugh me off the show, because I know Coach feels very strongly about RPOs, but I'm going to ask him a little bit about it, because as I have said, and I know this is my hot take of the day, and everybody out there that's making RPOs a living can call me an idiot. I think they look better on the whiteboard than they do in person. But anyhow, we'll get into talking about some of those things as well. But before we do, Coach, if you could please share with us a little bit about your football story, some of your military background. Like I said, you have a really unique perspective, because you've looked at leadership from a lot of different angles, and I think that makes you really valuable. And definitely I have gleaned a lot of insight from a lot of your talk on leadership and some different things like that, and I've certainly been appreciative of that. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, man. First of all, I appreciate you having me on the show, and for being a listener of our shows. Podcasting has been really neat for me. I think I'm 4 years in, if I'm not mistaken. This summer will be 4 years. And man, I've got to meet some really cool people. So I'm glad to be introduced to you and the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show. And of course, I'll have to go find it and kind of tune in and listen to what you're talking, because all those guys you said to have lined up, I like listening to them talk. Ian Tatum, anytime he's talking O-line, I'm tuning in. Mitch Johnson, I know you said you can have him on. We can get Joe on your show. I'll reach out to him. Kenny Simpson as well. Those guys will for sure come on and talk. They love talking ball just as much as I do. So once again, just thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
My story is it's a crazy one. It's kind of everywhere. It really goes all the way back to high school year. I'm number 3 out of 4 boys. My mom had 4 boys, and the brother that's just older than me, he joined the Army. He was kind of a renegade, didn't get along in many social circles, used alternative school to graduate high school. He just wasn't a cookie cutter for the world type of guy, and still isn't to this day. I mean, I love him very, very much. We have bonded better later in life, but it's mainly because he joined the military. He got deployed to Iraq. He was part of that big '03 push. And when he came home, it was about the time I was getting ready to graduate high school. And I basically just promised him, hey, man, I don't want you to ever have to go overseas again by yourself. Obviously, he had lots of soldiers there with him, but so I went and joined the Army. And another part of that, absolutely, is because I told my mom I want to go to college. I was born at a very weird point of smartness to where I'm like higher IQ, but I'm smart and I know it. I'm not like one of those people like I have no idea what intelligence is. So it's really been hurtful for me for most of my life because like I know I'm smart. And so it puts me in sticky situations all the time. But I basically told him, or told my mom I want to go to college. I don't want to waste the gifts God has given me. And she was like, well, we're not paying for it, Daniel. We don't have any money. So you better go figure it out. Well, it was like scholarships, which I wasn't going to get any of. I was not very good at football. I played every year I could play, but I just generally wasn't that. I didn't have the football IQ. I didn't have the smarts. I was kind of like one of those bookworm kids. And so coach would keep me on the team and play me, and he loved having me there and being enthusiastic, but I definitely wasn't the first choice to do anything. So the other option had to be the military as well for that. And so that's what I used the National Guard for. They paid for all my school, and they got me overseas with my brother. The kind of funny thing is I made a promise to him he wouldn't go by himself, so we deployed together one time. We went to Iraq together, and then we came home, and he got out of the Army, and I've since deployed twice without him. So he did one without me, and I got to do 2 without him. So he did not uphold his end of the deal, honestly. So that's what got me into the military. I'm currently sitting at 19 and a half years, 18 and a half, almost 19 years this June. What is this, May? So next month, I'll hit my 19th anniversary being in the National Guard. I love it. I don't know what I can't imagine a life without it. I'm one of those guys that always swore I'd get out at 10, and then, well, once you're at 10, it's halfway. You might as well go to 20. That's, of course, when we can retire. But I don't know what life would be like without that uniform hanging in my closet. So it's kind of become a big part of who I am. I do cherish my long breaks when I can get away and grow a little bit of a beard and not have to deal with the chaos. But man, when those weekends come and I get in the building, I'm just as happy. So we'll see. We'll see what the military side holds. But kind of get back to where that tied into coaching. I came home my last time. That was 2017. I'd just gotten married in 2016 and gotten deployed. I came home. My wife and I moved into the Tulsa area, Broken Arrow, kind of a suburb of Tulsa. And Kenny Ridley, who was my mentor in high school, I got into a little bit of trouble and had to go to court for some stupidity stuff. And he was kind of the guy that showed up to be the guy in my corner, honestly. He always was all through high school. He's just the guy that I could reach out to for anything, and he's still my mentor to this day. Love Kenny to death and keep up with him often. But he made contact with me, and I was kind of I found myself where I was not sure what I wanted to do in life. And I still don't really know what I want to be when I grow up, right? I'd gone to college, and I was pre-med there. I took the MCAT one time and scored like a 500, which if you don't know, that's like average. So it wasn't enough to get me in any schools. I had drank my way through my first 2 years of college because I came home from Iraq, from getting deployed, and I don't know. I guess that's just what we did as veterans, was you just drank a lot. That's the only culture I knew, and so I didn't try to change any of that. I just went with it. And so my GPA wasn't the best, so I couldn't get into med school. And eventually Kenny called me and said, hey dude, you've got a passion for helping people. You've got the leadership training. I think you need to go try to be a football coach. He's like, you already have your degree. You could slide right in, be a teacher and a coach. And having known what he did for me in my youth and still to this day, like I said, we talk often. I decided to give it a try. I was like, okay, maybe I could be that for someone else. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll give it a shot. And so that's what got me into football coaching. I jumped in my first year, a little school just north of me, about an hour. Went up as a brand new head coach, very small staff, small school, and he hired me as assistant. And like day 3, promoted me to DC. He was like, I need somebody that can. He said, I know you don't know anything, but at least you can make the play calls. And it was kind of like what you said earlier. Even if we're just cover 3 every single snap, we'll at least know what we're going to be running, and we can get better. Call some blitzes here and there, which led me into this very addictive drug, if you will, of football. Man, football is so crazy how addictive it is, and how much you fall in love with the game. And I'm big into the science and the X's and O's, and like getting kids to play better at different positions, and just some of them are head cases, and you got to lie to them a little bit and tell them they're faster than they are. Or, we're going to talk 4-2-5, but we talk about those hybrid outside backers. You're either a linebacker or safety, depending if I need you to be coach, I'm going to play linebacker. You are, absolutely. You're the outside linebacker. Or coach, I'm a safety. Yes, you are, absolutely, right? You're an overhang safety. Like, same position. We got to sell it to kids a little different. And so since then, man, I've just kind of chased knowledge. Second year, I did get fired mid-season. I took a job I was not ready for. I took a defensive coordinator position at the town I live in, and went in there all gung-ho, thinking I knew it all. Was just replicating Joe Daniel's 4-2-5, but I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know game planning. I didn't know like moving kids around to get them in the right spots yet. And I think we averaged like 36 points a game, giving up the first 3 games, and the coach let me go. And I've been trying to rebound ever since. I've gotten under the tutelage of Bill Blankenship for a year, who's an absolute legend here in our area. I got to go over, and I was the DC for his freshman team at Owasso, and then helped with the varsity on offense, actually, with the O-line, because that's kind of my other passion. I just really love O-line play. And so I got to learn from him, jumped over with Cameron Palmer and Chris Cole last year at Bristow. Chris has since gone back to Bixby, but Cameron's still the OC there at Bristow. Bo Collins was the guy that I was working with at Stillwell, helping him turn a program around. So I've just really got to work with a bunch of amazing coaches since then, since kind of falling on my face and try to rebuild my career. And it's kind of led me to the podcasting and learning every position on the field, and like just trying to be an asset for everybody. I learned the graphics side of the house and how to promote our kids, right? Making really neat graphics for game day and players of the game, and how do you put out I started making it in my own like magazine, and just trying to, any way we can celebrate kids, get them recruited, let the community build into the program. I've kind of gotten that overall look, and so it's been a lot of fun. Coming into football late in life, I say late in life, I was 32, I think, my very first year, and so something like that. I don't even know how old I am now. But yeah, so I mean, it is a little different because people perceive you as like the rookie coach, which is generally a 21-year-old fresh out of college. But I bring all that military experience and the leadership and people management, time management, event management, right? Putting on my own. I've done some built out clinics to help teams when Sulphur got hit with that tornado a couple of years ago. Trying to organize people that, so I can do a lot, but you're still like the rookie coach, and so it's been fun balancing act.
Well, I know when we're putting our staff together, that's one of the things that I always look for is guys that have varied experience in a lot of different facets. The other thing, and anybody that's been in a leadership capacity, I think is great to have around your kids, because it's going to help them develop as leaders and as people, because that's something that is difficult to teach, and there's not really. Obviously, there's a lot of books on it and different things, but you kind of have to figure out, like you said, that's one of the great parts about coaching is there's certain buttons to push with this kid that don't work with that kid, and you got to figure that out. And that's the same, and I shouldn't even say with kids, because that's the same way with adults. When you're a head coach and you're building a staff together, there's certain things that you got to kind of tell to this coach, and certain things that make guys more effective. And that's your job, I think, as a head coach, to make everybody the most effective they can be. I tell our guys that Coach Chip line every single day. We're trying to be the best version of ourselves. And how do we do that? We try to get a little better today than we were yesterday, a little better tomorrow than we were today. But moving on, Coach, share with us a little bit about your defensive philosophy. Obviously, been exposed to Joe Daniel, who has systems out there on basically every defense you can think. But I think has probably been known more of a 4-2-5 guy. We've taken a lot of principles of that and implemented it into we run a little more 3-3 just because I've always, probably last 12, 15 years, I've been more of an odd front guy. Started my career in a lot of even front systems. Primarily been on the offensive side of the ball, but obviously got to learn from some really good coordinators. But we've taken a ton of what he does from his 4-2-5 and tried to kind of implement the umbrella type system and different things like that within our 3-3. But talk to us a little bit about your defensive philosophy.
Yeah, so mine is, I kind of feel like my philosophy on both sides of the ball are pretty identical. And that is have a very simplistic core, a base that you can always lean into, and then present yourself in a lot of ways. And so in my first year, I kind of talked about being a DC after like day 3, and it was trial by fire, and I was handed a 4-3 defense, which I had no idea how to run. And we were trying to run cover 3 out of it, which I learned later, well, you can't really do that. Like those two just don't go together. There's certain pairings that can't exist. And the 4-3 with the cover 3 is kind of that, because you're running off a corner to go play a deep third, but he's also supposed to be your force guy on the outside to his side, right? And so we yelled at a guy a lot for a whole season. we yelled at one kid because he couldn't both cover the deep pass and play run, and 100% was us. It was us. And so I wanted to make sure after that year that I had a good sound base, that I didn't have to yell at any kid for not doing his job. He had one job. He did his job every time. Minus your hybrid players, your force guys are flat guys, but they're at least staying in the same vicinity. And so it just led my philosophy to be just stay base as much as possible. This is tweaked a little bit in the last few years, but still at the heart of it, it's the same. So I'm a 4-2-5 guy. I've leaned into the 3-4 a lot in the last few years just because it fit the kids. And I think that's another part of it is your defense better fit who you've got. And I also think about that in a little bit backwards from other people. If I have got very few defensive linemen, I'm going to run a 4-2-5. And that some people think that's counterintuitive. Why would you put more D linemen on the field if you have less? Well, because my outside linemen are my DNs, or I can roll down an outside backer there and put his hand in the dirt and let him use his speed to really get around the edge, right? I'm not so worried about that being an NFL or a D1 type defensive end. I don't have it anyway. But if you play a 3-4, those 4 eyes or 5s, they kind of have to be real life D linemen. And so if I've got more D linemen or I've got more body types that fit there and kids that can play it, I'm probably going to run a 3-4. And a lot of people think that's counterintuitive. Well, if I've got more D linemen, I want to put more on the field. But however you want to do it. But that's why I like the 4-2-5. It's just very flexible. Those outside backers or safeties, like we kind of talked earlier, right? They can be overhang safeties. They can be outside backers, depending on what coverage you want to run. When we are running our base cover 3, I can use a lot of body types. I can put a corner there and call it my nickel or dime package. I can put a safety there and run some kind of, I can work into a read 2 package if I want, or stick with cover 3. I can put a true backer there and let him just come fit real good and just be help to the outside, right? So, and then interior is just kind of doing whatever you want. You can stay base, you can mix them up, you can stunt and blitz, you can do whatever you want in there. And so I think that's kind of become my core philosophy is present as many things as possible, as many blitzes, stunts, etc., but with fewer fronts. And that's kind of what I've leaned in. I also am a firm believer in being multiple. So you talking about being 3-3, that's kind of the ultimate multiple front. I like it because you build fronts out of the 3-3, right? I'm building an over and under front. I'm building a tight front. And we're not going to align to it every time, but I'm going to get there post-snap. I think that's big to do. I think you better carry a 3-4 package, a 3-3 package, a 4-2-5. Even if it's just one coverage is paired with that front. Look, every time we're in 3-4, we're running read 2. That's fine. Every time we run 3-3, we're going to carry this blitz or this blitz, and that's it. And we're pairing it with cover 3 behind or whatever. Because offensively, I think that's the same thing I do there as well. It's just I want to run a very few concepts, and I want to show you 1,000 formations. So if I can do that on defense, that just makes us better. But your kids have to do all the communicating, right? So I think that's pretty much the base of the philosophy.
Well, I know, Coach, in watching all your stuff, we're very along the same lines offensively. I prefer to tag things as opposed to putting in a new play. It's one of the reasons I like 4 vert so much, is not necessarily for the vertical part of it, but it's such a tag-friendly concept. There's been years where, to be honest with you, we completed the vertical part of it very few times, but we ran a ton of shallows, ton of underneath stuff where we tagged one guy and we're able to get a lot of mileage out of it that way. I think concepts that I know you like the term modular, where you're putting in things and can use a term in there, tag something to get to something else, but it's not a lot of learning for your kids. And I think that is a huge way to go about teaching it, because I think it helps the kids when they know that this tag is just talking to this guy. The rest of you are doing the exact same thing. You're doing this, 100%. You're doing this, you're doing this. We're tagging this. And I think you can do that defensively as well. But moving on to the next question, and you've talked about getting into a little more 3-4. My early years in coaching, I coached under Don Kramer, who was a defense coordinator for Jesse Parker, kind of an Arizona coaching legend, and we were a big 4-3 team. But like you said, we only played cover 3 to certain formations. If it was a balanced formation, we were balanced, and if it was a little more unbalanced, you got trips, we always rolled to cover 3. Everybody knew we were rolling to cover 3, but we played it really well in that situation. But there was different ways to do it. So why the 4-2-5, though? Specifically, if you were trying to kind of major, and I love that term, major and minor and different things, because I think you can certainly do different things. Like we run a sprinkling of outside zone, but we definitely major in gap scheme. Don't run inside zone, because to be perfectly honest, I don't teach it very well. But what you major in, if you're going to major in 4-2-5, why is that the one you would go with? And I know, like I said, from watching your and Coach Daniel's show, there's a lot of reasons for it, but give me your reasons for it. If you were going to major in the 4-2-5, what would be the reason?
Yeah, it just comes back to flexibility for me. I think the 4-2-5 just makes you able to answer anything. One of my favorite things to do on offense is somebody is in an odd front, I'm going to bring in 2 tight ends. Because I've taken what you want to do and I've made you adjust it somehow. So you can't run your base against me. And now you've got 2 outside backers rolled up onto the line of scrimmage. In a 4-2-5, if somebody gives me 2 tight ends, we just slide a half man. And we've already answered that question. If it's 1 tight end, well, that's easy. We're already in a 4 front, so I just have a 6 technique now instead of a 5. And if you go empty or something like that, well, I've already got 5 DBs on the field, so I have an answer for that. And so it really allows me to play any personnel grouping that you want to present. I can play them without making a lot of changes. Now, of course, we still carry some stuff. I can still get an extra D lineman in there and pull a DB off or something if I need to. But it just doesn't happen a lot. And so I think that's the number one answer. The kids, they can kind of be moved around, and in that modular, that tagging lifestyle that we live in, I can make it make sense for any kid that I put in any position. And so you talked about being, cover 3 and just wanting to roll different, roll to those zones from different kids. We can tag that up into 4-2-5, and I can overload you to one side or the other. Like it just has so many answers to where, yes, the 3-4 is super balanced, and that's what a lot of people kind of talk about it. Like it's very balanced, and I agree, right? The 4-2-5 in its base form, especially if you try to be too high, it isn't unbalanced because I've got an extra safety to one side or to the other. But if you're just going to run cover 1, cover 3, well, then it becomes very, very balanced, right? I mean, essentially becomes a 4-4, which you can call it that, and I'll say, okay, cool, you're right, it is the 4-4, right? But we can just kind of teach our kids to do different things out of that same presentation. So, that would be the reason why. I talked about earlier, I can move kids. My defensive ends don't always have to be studs. They can be outside backers. A lot of times my safeties are just, if a kid doesn't make it at safety, I roll him down to outside backer. If he doesn't make it there, I roll him down to a defensive end. And so I can just keep kids kind of moving around, and use whatever God has gifted me that year, because we don't ever know what kids we're going to have in the building.
Very much so. Definitely. That's one of the reasons I'm not going to get off on a tangent where I love coaching in Northern Arizona, because we coach who shows up. In the Valley, I'm not sure that's how it is anymore. There's not an official transfer portal, which I've heard you talk about in Oklahoma, which is just absolutely wild to me that there's an official transfer portal in high school.
Yeah.
There is not that in Arizona, but there certainly is an unofficial one that guys definitely take advantage of in various ways. But again, I prefer, hey, Jimmy walked in the door, let's see what Jimmy can do, and coach Jimmy up to the best of our ability, or what have you. But I know in various systems that I have been in, I know when we ran the 4-3 for Coach Kramer, we always had to have a straight killer at Mike. We had to have a dude at Mike linebacker. Made the whole deal kind of run when we had a dude at Mike linebacker. Our 3-4 stuff, same thing. Our Mike and Will, I thought were really, really important. What do you think is the most important positions in the 4-2-5? I've heard a lot of guys talk about free safety. And I will tell you this, last couple of years we've run our 3-3, and we have probably played cover one on every snap, and it's because we had a Division I basketball player who was also our quarterback at free safety. And even if somebody got beat underneath and man, he was most of the time going to make us right, and he was definitely going to make us right if it was a ball that was thrown down the field, because he was just almost a sideline. Not quite sideline to sideline, but he was incredible. And watch out for him in New Mexico next year. He'll be playing point guard for the Lobos, and I'm predicting an all Mountain West season as a freshman for him. But he made a lot of those things right. But what do you think is if you had your one dude, where are you putting him in the 4-2-5?
He's absolutely playing free safety, and that's because he does become that cleanup, right? When we talk spill to force, he's the alley, right? So he shakes the hands of the spill guys, and he shakes the hand of the force guy, and he fits that. So he does get to play both sides of the ball. If I'm playing my true cover 3, cover 1, you can't really isolate him to one side of the field or the other, so he gets to play all over the place. In the pass game, he's shutting down that middle of the field, and so he gets to be the kid that helps everyone. I think he's the ultimate. That's where the ultimate player goes. If it's the best kid and you have one, that's where I'm putting him. If you have a kid that can kind of fit those and you still have a stud, just a dude out there, then it goes to those hybrid players. It goes to those outside backers. I think because of the way we play spill to force, the inside guys all just become pluggers. So as long as you can read a key and do what that key tells you, I don't need you to be Superman in there, right? I just need you to make sure that the ball doesn't fill into your gap. And so we spill all that out, and then we just let those playmakers on the outside make it happen. And so that's where I'm putting them.
Coach, I know I've had this discussion with a lot of coaches. Our defense coordinator and I have gone back and forth with this. He was on a staff a few years ago at Casa Grande in 4A that won the state championship, and he told me they played one coverage the entire season. They went 14-0, played one coverage the entire season. I've seen guys in my study of things, and maybe you can't do that in Texas at the 6A or 7A levels. I don't know because I've never been there. But I do know and I would argue in Arizona, even at the 5A and possibly the 6A, although the quarterback play, largely because of the weather, because you can have these quarterback gurus out here doing stuff year-round. I would say at the 6A level, at the highest levels of Arizona, you have to be a little bit more flexible. But I really believe in 4A, you can get away with one coverage. So depending on the size of the school and the situation, how many coverages do you carry or do you think you need to carry?
Man, this is one of those, like you talked about, variables, right? And it's who's on the other side. And I think that's what it gets into. You got to look at your schedule and say, who do we need to beat? And that comes down to like where you are as a team. Or if you're an 0-10, you need 1, maybe 2. If you're 5-5 and you're just looking to kind of turn the corner, and maybe it's still 1 or 2, but you really need to see who's the teams that's beating you, that's keeping you from where you want to be. And what beats them, right? If they're just out there running cover 3 beaters all day, well, you probably need to carry another a couple off coverages. And if you're the team that's, 10-0 and looking to make the state championship run, what are those guys that are winning it every year? What are they running? And what are they beating up on? What does their kid look like? If they got a quarterback that can dissect the defense, no matter how you try to disguise it and hide it, then maybe you need a little bit more. So I think that's a question that's just has a lot of particulars about it. I think that you need to have, when I'm installing a cover 3, a cover 1, and read 2 coverage. And that's all I think you really need at any level. And then, like I said, you can reduce that even if you're just trying to win 2 or 3 games this year. Running more is not probably going to get you there. So you may even reduce that some and just try to make those things fit everything. You can run cover 3, and Con Chase is another guy did it up in Massachusetts where, kind of what you talked about. I don't know if he won a state championship or not, but deep into the playoffs, undefeated season, and they just ran cover 3 base every single play. If you just do that, you get good at it and you start making it fit stuff, right? I mean, our trips check is just a version of cover 3. Quads check is the same as our trips. Any kind of empty is just another version of cover 3. So it's like you don't need anything else. If they want to pile them in and come at you with, 23 personnel or whatever, cover 3 gets you there. So it's 100% whatever you need. I think there's a single coverage that can take care of it. But I'm like a 3 coverage kind of guy. I have my base. I think read 2 just answers a whole bunch of questions with everybody trying to run spread stuff. And then a cover 1 for just, we talked RPOs earlier. If somebody wants to come out and run up a lot of RPOs, we know the answer has to be, at least to start, until they can beat it, it's got to be cover 1 or cover 0. And so just go pick on those guys and make the run game beat you.
Definitely agree with that stuff there, Coach. I have been fortunate. Like I said, I've worked with a lot of really great defensive coordinators. We're actually moving our defensive guy over to the offensive side. I've been our defensive coordinator for years and years. Fantastic football coach. Was definitely more of we brought 6 a lot and played cover 0 a lot. That was in his son's a world champion cowboy is on our team this year, and a really good little football player. And that's just his personality. He's gonna roll the dice. The guy that we have this year, Coach Brusso, usually on the show with us, fantastic football coach. It leans more into a base philosophy. He wants our base to be able to answer most questions. When I worked with Don Kramer, he was a 4-3 guy, and we hardly ever blitzed. When I was at Red Mountain, we were a zone pressure team. We ran a ton of zone pressures, a lot of different ways to run zone pressures. So I've seen a lot, and we were very successful defensively in all those stops. So if there's only one thing I've learned in football, it's this. There's a lot of different ways to be successful. I think guys that kind of say there's only this way or their way are and I'm not here to say anybody's wrong. I would say that's incorrect, and it's proven every year when there's teams that win state championships in every single offense or defense you can imagine. I have loved all the coaches we've had on, but I'll be the first to admit when I had a run and shoot guy on, a really successful run and shoot guy. I took over a 2-8 program. They were 12-1 his second year in the program. So this guy's running the old school Mouse Davis, fantastic run and shoot really well. I didn't understand a word he said. I was watching all the arrows and circles, and I was like, I'd have no chance. And obviously his kids do it because they execute it at such a high level. I can't do it. I'm not that smart. But my point is there's a lot of different ways to attack something and a lot of different ways to be successful that I would say. So when you're talking about that, what are some of the top blitzes out of the 4-2-5? Because when I think 4-2-5, I really don't think as many stunts and exotic pressures as you do in the 3-4 is really where I think of that. In 3-3, you can do a lot of front stuff. I don't know that the pressures are quite as exotic as they can be in the 3-4. I think they probably can be, but what are some of your top stunts and blitzes out of a 4-2-5?
Yeah, I like, you're right on with the majority of the blitzes coming out of like an odd front, and sometimes we'll get to that. We'll stand, and once again, it goes back to my defensive ends are athletes over being a true defensive end. So I'll stand them up and let them go cover a flat and bring stuff off the backside, or um, we'll get to odd front stuff generally when we want to blitz. Pretty much everything else is it looks like base. I like to bring safeties inside the box a lot. And so we'll just go a 3-over-3 coverage, and then that's how we'll kind of bring our extra guy, right? And so whether that's a safety, a linebacker, we're going to cover their responsibility with someone else and just minimize how many people we're dropping. So you're right, it doesn't carry a big exotic blitz package. It's all in there. You can send pretty much one guy in any gap you want, which is kind of how I've started tagging up defense instead of telling one kid a whole bunch of words that means that he blitzes. I just have a blitz name that goes to a gap and has a certain coverage, and then I tag the kid I want to do that blitz. And so it kind of gets back into the tagging. But a lot of times it is just bringing it where I feel like they're weak. A lot of it's game plan based. And so, it's just like offense. I'm not going to tag 7 of my guys to do something different. I'm just going to tag 1 or 2 to do something different and let everybody else run the base play. So it doesn't get very exotic. If you're going to stem those things up or draw, it's usually like, you got to go cover 0. Joe's made pretty famous his Tiger Cat blitz, which is just a all out cover 0. Everybody's coming unless, so it just has a bunch of rules. And if there's no wide receivers, we're bringing the house. If there's 1 wide receiver or 2 wide receivers, those corners are going to cover them up in man, and everybody else is coming. A lot of blitz peeled type situation. So that's like the ultimate exotic blitz, I guess you would say.
I have heard him talk about that a ton. I'd love to know a little bit more of that about the Tiger Cat blitz. I find that stuff interesting on there. But this is one we've talked about from an offensive and defensive perspective, and you can hit it from any angle that you want there on this. But when you are installing your system, it could be offensively or defensively, how many days? Because we've heard this answer has been all over the place from coaches, and I find it fascinating. I am not an air raid guy, but I love getting everything in 3 days. Now, that doesn't mean everything in with the shifts, with the motions, with all that stuff, but the base version of it is in 3 days. And then day 4, 5, and 6 are a repeat of day 1, 2, and 3. But now you're going to add the exotics. You're going to add one other layer. And then maybe 7, 8, and 9, you're going to add another layer and those type of things. So walk us through an installation process for you.
When I started, I would have told you, 10 days to install everything. But you're right on with, I'm not putting all of my tags that I carry in my hat in install. Right? So we get spring football here in Oklahoma. So you can do a little bit there. And they just changed the rules. We finally have our freshmen in spring ball, which has not been the case. So it used to be a weird time because you're installing for everybody but your freshmen, and they can't get an install until August. And then do you start over? Do you try to midpoint at some? It just got really weird. But now we got freshmen, and so, install for me is going to look a little different. I'm somewhere between 3 and 5 days, depending on how fast the kids can pick it up. But something I do different now, and I learned this from Ron Mackey and his air raid stuff, is we're going to repeat days back to back. So day 1 and then day 1 again. Because he has found that helped kids be able to learn it and remember it a little more concrete versus, hey, day 1, we're going to inside zone, power, 4 verts and Y cross. And then day 2, we're going to get on to GH counter, GT counter, whatever. You go on and on. But instead of just trying to make kids learn 6 run plays and 10 pass plays in 5 days, you just learn 2 and 2 if you want, or whatever. And then you just repeat it. And it helps them kind of lock those details in. So that's really, I'm probably on a 4-day install now. So if you give me 10 days, we're going to do day 1, day 2, day 2, and then a big review day for my 5th day. And then the next Monday, day 3, day 4, day 4, and then a big review day for our 10th day. That's a little bit more what I'm leaning on now. And that's on offense or defense. Primarily on offense because that's what I've been doing lately. But defense, it would be the exact same for me. I have no reason to unless as an OC, I often have pushed DCs to have to install more than they want to because we are going to go empty on day one. So you better have an empty coverage, and we're gonna go 22 personnel on day one. So you have to have a package for that. So I may force the defensive coordinator's hand a little bit, but we'll work through that. And we'll make things happy on both sides. Yeah. So I think that's where it is. I think it's a 4-day install, repeating days, a couple review days in there, and that gets all of your core stuff. I generally want to put in 1 to 2 run plays. Once again, depends on the kids. What can they pick up? Is that all new O-line? Are they, weirdly enough, I guess 2 out of my last 3 years, we're taking kids from like a flex bone type offense to a more modern offense. It's single wing, but we run it with spread concepts and air raid pass concepts. So it kind of does get to be all over the place. So those kids needed a little bit more time in year one to pick things up. So you can't put in as much. This year, they're on their second install over at Bristow, and Coach Palmer's been telling me, like, dude, it's so much easier in spring ball getting this stuff installed because the kids just remember a bunch of it, right? Which, once again, what does an install look like? Well, maybe it matters how long you've been at a place. You know what I mean?
So obviously you've been fortunate to be at Prescott for a long time, so our installs look a little different. And I think a ton of that probably depends on, do you have football class during the day? We're really blessed. We have our varsity in 7th hour. Now we have baseball and basketball kids that aren't with us during that time. Our freshmen we all have in 6th hour. So our install does look a little bit different in that we've been using the same system for quite a while and had some different things in that regard, but we will do, and I know there's different ways to look at this. There's some guys that won't do, we're not going to live 5 days a week in class, so we're doing something football scheme related during the January, February, March months, and I don't think we burn them out because we're not keeping them after. They're going to be done every day, and definitely a big feed the cats guy, and that's something that's helped us a ton. We've been in the quarterfinals 3 out of the last 4 years, and I don't think it's coincidental that that's also when we started doing Feed the Cat stuff was 21. We had fresh guys at the end of the season, guys that were really excited about continuing to play football, which I'm not sure in my early years if I had that. And that's 100% on me. That's not on them, because I think as a coach, an older coach told me this when I was younger, and I didn't understand it till now. And I mean this, kids love football. They care about football, but they're never going to care as much as the head coach or the coordinators or I just don't. There's a lot of things going on in their life. There's a lot, and I don't think you necessarily want them to have that. You might have your 1 or 2, but the vast majority of your kids are not going to care as much as the coaches, and that's okay, because you want to build a kid that has a lot of things going in his life that is not all contingent on one thing. And we want to build people like that. I need to be like that. I have definitely gotten better in my older years at being, not letting a loss on the field affect me in other aspects of my life. And it's still hard because, I tell my wife this. My wife teaches 2nd grade, and I say, sweetie, obviously you're a great teacher, but if you take this quiz with your kids and they all do poorly, it's not going to be in the front page of the paper the next morning. They're not going to say Badgers blown out, or it's not going to say Miss Collette's kids, 70% of them did not pass this test or whatever. So there is an element of that I think you kind of have to understand as you get older, and I think that comes with maturity and doing it a while and different things like that. But next question, if there is one thing defensive football that I think is just hands down the most important, it's how you're playing spill and force and how those guys work together. If I got to only pick one thing to drill, it would be that. Because if you don't get that, I don't think you're going to have anything from a defensive perspective. So how do you go about drilling that? Your defensive ends are spilling it to those force guys. How do you go about drilling that? Do they drill it together? Is that an indie period together, a group period? What are your thoughts on that?
So I've really taken Kenny Simpson's big little big idea in practice, meaning, and kind of back to your last point, kids need and want to know the why behind everything, right? We're well past the days of because coach said so. They want to know the why. And so if you do the big, little, big, and what I mean is we start practice as a team. We basically start in team. We look at the big picture. So if I'm teaching, spill to force, every kid needs to know where they fit in the run fits, right? And why. I can't have a nose tackle that's fitting a gap and then angry because he doesn't ever make the tackle against an outside zone team. Like, yeah, but you never are, right? That's not your job. Your job is to make sure he doesn't cut it back into your A gap because you've plugged the gap. And so I need him to see that. Same thing with my inside backers, right? I need them read their key, fit their gap, whether that's your scrape guy or you a first open window guy, whatever your coaching philosophy is. They need to go fit their gap so that we ensure that the ball can't cut back. And so I'll show them that. We'll all walk to the gap of our responsibility for that specific run play, wherever your read takes you. And then we look at the secondary level guys. So we talked about force, our outside backer playing force. So we're going to, let him see where he does not need to come inside. He needs to fit it tight, but he's got to stay outside. He's got to be able to force those things back to what eventually becomes the alley guy. So earlier, your question about where does the best player go? Well, it's that free safety where he's fitting alley because he does have to shake both those hands. He is the stitching that ties us all together. And so we'll look at that. So we'll all walk through a run play of each type. If you need to do a gap scheme play, need to do a zone play, whatever, we're going to look at the big picture and let everyone see their why. And then we can break it out into Indy. And once you go to Indy, now that they know what their piece of the pie looks like, they can go practice being really good at that. And so, then your Indy drills are just whatever you fit. I've always put those, I like to take all the safeties. So free safety and outside safeties, whether you call it strong safety, weak safety, whatever you're calling them, those overhang guys, I like to always drill them together because the force to alley is a more important relationship to me than force to spill. Because that alley guy has to understand, man, if you're taking bad reads and you're 2 seconds late, this play's going to the house. Because force's job is not to tackle. His job is to turn it back to you. And if you're not home to receive what he's sending back to you, I don't care if they're running the worst blocked outside zone in the history of football. It's going to go to the house because you're not there to fit your spot. So I like for those two to be able to really have that relationship in the run fit game. And then, everyone else can kind of practice their stuff individually. As the season, moves on, we get into a little more group stuff or moving our indie stuff together. Those drills should evolve and graduate to a more advanced. And so, D-line and linebackers should be together. Same thing, we're going to be drilling that indie. But now, I don't have to drill linebacker reads because we've done that. We've gotten good at that and we've advanced on to now I'm reading it, maybe even reading a triangle, whatever your coaching progression is, whatever your kids can handle. But now I need to see where are those big bodies in front of me going to be as I'm taking that read. So where am I most likely to have to take my steps? So that's kind of how I do it, man. We do the big, little, big, give them the why, break it down to its smallest pieces, and then build it back up for a group or team event.
I know that's one of the things I enjoy most about listening to Coach Simpson and Coach Daniel talk and yourself is I think you guys do a really, really good job of putting it into pieces that the players can understand because I think that's important. I remember hearing from coaches a lot. It really doesn't matter what you know. It's what you can get them to know. It's not, you guys aren't going to go to the 50-yard line and draw X's and O's on a whiteboard. And if you did, quite frankly, nobody's showing up to watch that.
Right.
They're showing up to watch these kids play football and get after it a little bit. So I think that's
look. If you get Hal Mummy and Bill Belichick to meet at the 50-yard line, I will pay for a ticket.
That might be true. That might
outside
be true.
of that, there's not a lot of guys that I'm paying to go watch.
I don't know if everybody maybe in Oklahoma. I don't know if everybody in our town we get big crowds on Friday night. I don't know if we draw a big crowd for that. We might. It'd be fun to figure that out though. So next question, when you guys are going about your opposition scouting from a defensive perspective, what are some things you look for, some areas you look to attack? What are some things you really want to take from the film? Because I think I would say that we've gotten a ton better as a staff in implementing stuff that's actually valuable. For a while there, I was putting in every piece of data in the history of data, and I'm not sure it helped us a ton. I've talked about this with coaches as well, and some people vehemently disagree with this, and that's okay. We play a lot of ground and pound type teams, play a lot of wing T teams, a lot of teams like that. I'll be the first, I look at it and I do take the data, but I don't look a lot at down and distance because a lot of those teams, quite frankly, their 3rd and 7 call is buck sweep and their 3rd and 2 call is buck sweep. And they're very good at it on 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 2. But the one that I've gotten a lot of is formationally. A guy like you probably wouldn't get a lot out of that because you're going to have a million formations and you're going to have different ways to run it out of those formations. There's a lot of guys that I would say are very, very set specific. They get in this formation, you know this is coming. This is 100% coming right now, and you got to get your kids to know that. But what are some things you want to take away from your opponent's scout?
So it's a very good question, and I am currently in the over-analyze era of my football career. Like you said, you've kind of moved on from, but it's because I fell into Cody Alexander and all of his stuff. And if you don't know who Cody Alexander, he's absolutely a defensive think tank. That's how he kind of talks about himself as well. But I bought his book and I started breaking down offenses with it. And very quickly came to exactly what you just said. People will get into certain formations to do certain things, and they won't use it for anything else. Back alignment will give away like 70% of someone's playbook. And I don't know why. I don't know if it's just they don't know they're doing it. Maybe they don't self-scout. Maybe they don't care. Like you said, sometimes they're just going to run buck sweep because there's football on the field. You know what I mean? So some of them don't care if you know their tendencies or whatever. They're just going to do stuff. And so, I started breaking people down with his, which led me to breaking down my own offense, and it's a whole thing. I put in a ton of data points on Huddle every single year. But game plan wise, what I really want to know is like, and Coach Kenny Ridley told me about this early on. Basically, what are their top 5 formations? What are their top 3 run and pass plays that they're doing out of those? And then can I find a way to stop them multiple ways? So if I have plan A, B, and C for each of their top things, I should be able to go out and be successful on Friday night. Now, you got into the point of like, when are they using those? Well, at the end of the night, defensively, all you can do is practice the generalities, right? I don't know what play he's going to call. So I have to be able to practice the things I think he's going to try to do because they've been so good at it. And kind of go from there. And so I guess really what I want to get into defensively in the future is just not being so reactive. A little bit more of do things on our time and less about what they're trying to do. So if I'm going to call a blitz, it's not because it's 3rd and 12, which we're probably blitzing anyway, but it's because I want to fill a gap here with a different body, or I want to confuse an offensive lineman on this play. If it's a pass down, that's something we look a lot is what's their weakest link? So, after generalities and I figure out what formations they run in, pass plays, run plays, what do they do well? Then I move on to kids. Like, who's their studs? Who's the guy that I cannot let beat me this week? One of my favorite things is find out who's the player that's amazing that they don't know they have. It's kind of their own diamond in the rough. To me, he's perceived to be like, I've got to keep an eye on that guy because he's sneaky good, but they haven't figured it out yet because they might figure it out that week. And I think we've all seen a game like that where they finally get the ball to Joey and Joey just breaks it and goes. We had a kid that his name was Shannon, and we called him Slantin' Shannon. Shannon wasn't really good at anything in football, but if you threw him a slant route, it's going to the house. He just had this ability to not care that he might get hit in the mouth on a slant. And so he just caught them all and just made people miss. And so Slantin' Shannon could run slants like none other. But if you put him in any other play in football, I don't know that you necessarily want him on the field. It's just one of those things.
Ball, but
yeah. And so, kind of going from generalities to specifics of kids, and then, a little bit of situational. What are they doing situational? What's their go-to? Kenny always tells me you better have an identity. Well, what's their identity? If I do get them the game's on the line, it's 4th and 5. What are they probably going to run, and how am I planning to stop it? So you talked about maybe it's buck sweep on 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 7, 4 and 5, 4 and 12. It don't matter. They're going to try to run buck sweep. Then I need to have an answer for buck sweep. If they're an outside zone team, if they're an air raid team, whatever it is, I need to have pinpointed like when the game's on the line, what are they probably going to, and who's maybe even the kid that they're probably going to try to push the ball to. So I think that's really what we're looking for on defense. Once I started running every play out of like 45 formations, I quit being so formationally worried and more personnel worried. Like, do they have... Now, this hurts small teams because if you're breaking down a small team, well, it's best 11. So they're going to run everything with the same 11 kids. If they can personnel package it, I obviously need to bring answers to that game as well.
That is an interesting point, too, there, because you're not going to see... When we were in 6A, we saw this guy's got 6, 7, 8 personnel groupings, or, and we don't see that in the 4A level. We just don't. Those guys are on the field, and that's okay. There's a couple little wrinkles here and there where if this kid's here. You'll see way more, I think, at the small school level. Tommy's their stud. Tommy's a fullback, they're running trap. Tommy's a tailback, they're running belly or sweep or whatever. But that's an interesting way to look at it as well there. So last question, Coach, and admittedly, I don't teach it well. I am one of the episodes I enjoyed most you guys did with Travis Davidson, and I immediately got in contact with him and did my personality profile because that one was
Good.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. I really enjoyed that episode a ton. I enjoy all your episodes, but that one's one that particularly sticks out to me. But I ask this because the worst thing you can tell me, I'm very concrete. So I've watched Kenny Simpson talk about they're running buck or what have you, and they have that number 2 receiver kind of replacing the inside backer. And it's almost like you'll hear people describe that route as it's a feel. And that's like the worst thing you can tell me. I want concrete directions on how to do this. A feel is a little bit, that one's tough for me to teach. You're going to have to rely on the kid to get it. So maybe that's why I have not ever been a big RPO guy. Although we've done a ton of packaged plays, which to me are different than RPO. You got fast screens on both sides or what have you, and you got your interior run going. But how do you drill the RPO? Because I'll be honest, we saw a team that really carved us up a couple years ago, and then we played all cover one, and to be honest, we've had very few problems with RPO since. Now, we haven't played a Division I signal caller that can really do some things in that regard, but how do you drill RPOs and what are the best ways to get them implemented to be effective? A little bit different question now. And how does that fit into maybe your defensive philosophy?
Yeah, so offensively getting RPOs in, I think number one, you've got to trust the kid because we're not calling or tagging an RPO at our school. The quarterback is tagging it once he sees what the defense is doing. So you talk about how do you be successful with it? Well, let your kids go out and see the defense and say, hey, there's not a body over there. Run this RPO. It's a little different. Kenny is calling he's tagging exactly what RPO he wants, and 90% of the time I think they're throwing that RPO. So his is almost a pass play called on the back of his run play, and with a little bit of a read. So when it goes into drilling, just, figure out who you're going to pick on that play. Start small. Just pick on inside backers. They're pretty easy. Or outside backer to the side that you want to, opposite of what you're running. We've gotten into the same side RPOs a lot here recently, and that's where you really pick on a kid. We told earlier about how important a force player is. Well, now I'm reading him, so if he forces well, I just throw the ball to a kid that's where he used to be. If he doesn't, we run the ball where he's not fitting. So, it's kind of... It's really a cheat code. If you can coach them well. So I think it's the first thing, you got to take the gloves off. You got to give the kids some ownership and let them go out and make it right. And if they can't, take it off the table for a while until you get a kid that can do it. Kenny talks all the time about he's got quarterbacks that you absolutely are not reading this. You're throwing it or handing it off. I'm telling you which to do. And then he's got kids that make 2 reads and then keep it and run or throw a route after the second read. So once again, meet your kids where they are. And then give them a package that fits.
Coach Tatum talked about those inside guys. He's had a lot more success reading, and I know Coach Simpson's talked about a ton.
For sure.
that's part of the reason he thinks RPOs tie in so well to gap scheme is they see that guard pull and you're going to trigger, whereas not quite as fast on zone. But sorry to cut you off there. Continue, Coach.
No, you're okay. And so, how do you make them successful is that, and, just putting bodies where people aren't. That's pretty much how we just teach kids space. Look for space. Where's there not a person, put an offensive player there. If you can throw the ball to it, do it. I think another key point on being successful is you better be good at running the ball. If you aren't good at running the ball, it doesn't matter that you're calling an additional play on top of your already not good run play. They're not going to have to sacrifice it. There's no kid that's in conflict if you can't run the ball well. If I can stop your outside zone and or let's just say power, because gap schemes tend to work better with RPOs, in my opinion, because those inside backers have got to read and go fit when a guard pulls, or somebody does, whatever your defensive scheme is. Somebody better answer for you adding a hat over there, or your gap scheme play is just going to hit well and it doesn't matter. So, if you're running power and you can be really, really good at it, it tends to make the RPO more successful. Now, some guys will say, well, why would I use the RPO then if I'm already good at running? Because it will open things up even more. Once you make a kid angry because he's very disciplined, he did exactly what coach told him and he followed a guard. Great. He didn't make the tackle because I threw the ball behind his head to a slant and he went for 15 yards and a safety tackled him. So next time, what does he do? Oh, that's a pulling guard. I'm going to stay home. Well, then we hand the ball off and he's not there to make the tackle because he didn't add a hat to the run fit. Now coach is yelling at him. Now he's mad because coach has yelled at him because he fit too good and now he didn't fit well enough. So it's like, that's all I want to do. It doesn't have to be an X's and O's, super scheme or anything. I just need like one or two kids to question everything they've ever been taught because we're making him wrong a play or two a game. And if you give me, a 15-yard slant or a bubble or a post or whatever we want to run as that RPO that week, I think we're going to be okay. And that adds just enough magic to what we want to do anyways. We've already confused you with 1,000 formations and shifts and trades and motions all over the place. Your kids are already tired. They're mentally exhausted. You already had to break down 50 formations to play us this week and try to get kids lined up right to them. And also we're shifting and man, that RPO is just like the icing on the cake.
There's a lot going on with that, definitely, Coach. We've done some things similar to that, but more formationally, where we've set something up 3 weeks in a row. We've run this every single time we've run that formation, and then we'll line up in that the first play, and now we ran power out of it 3 weeks in a row, and now we're taking our shot play. And we do that just for the same reason you're talking about. So Timmy's going, Coach is full of it, man. They said they're running power on this, and the first thing they did was go deep or what have you. If you can create a little bit of hesitation in their mind, I think that's very critical to your success, both from an offensive and defensive perspective. Well, Coach, I cannot thank you enough. The whole hour has flown by. I've loved talking to you. Really a wealth of knowledge, and it's been cool for me because, like I said, when you were talking to one of your episodes the other day, if you don't have something out at a certain point, I'm one of those guys going, come on, I need my episode here. Let's go. So please continue doing what you're doing because I enjoy the heck out of it, and I'm really appreciative for all you and everybody does for the coaching community. So I want to thank you for that, and good luck in your continued coaching journey. And if I'm ever out to Oklahoma, we'll have to have a cold one together or something
Absolutely.
like that. So
yeah,
anyhow,
man. Stay in
please
touch.
keep in touch, and I will we'll definitely be having you on again because I want to talk a little more offensive ball. Definitely want to dive into more of the Bixby offense type stuff because I've followed a lot of their stuff and I love it. It's just absolutely good stuff. A whole lot of ways. Obviously, they do a lot of things, but man, they run counter well. And
Yes.
I'm a big counter guy, and I love to run me some counter and seeing all their variations. The one short video they did where they were talking about different ways to tag one-word calls was 11 minutes of brilliance on the internet. So if you haven't checked that one
awesome
out, make sure you do. But again, Coach, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time for another edition of the Blue and Gold Gridiron Show. So thanks a lot, everybody.